The federal government is asking state governors who are yet to implement the recently authorized 70,000 naira minimum wage to do so as part of a special New Year gift for workers in a variety of industries. It also announced that President Bola Tinubu will start a newly created project called the Labor, Employment and Empowerment Program LEAP to employ 2.5 million people yearly over the next 4 years. Nkirika Onyejocha, Minister of State for Labor and Employment, made the statement in Abuja while addressing questions from labor correspondents at a press briefing. We do apologize for that mix-up in that photograph. That's the Minister of Women Affairs. And Arise News analyst Frank Tietie joins me in the studio to look at these issues. Merry Christmas. Great to see you.
My pleasure.
Thank you for having the time. I know the town is buzzing.
Yeah, indeed.
And you're here. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you.
Yes, so the federal government is practically pleading with states to implement, those that have not yet implemented, to implement the new national minimum wage. I mean, when you hear stories like this, how does it come to you? Considering that this is a law, as we understand it, the minimum wage went through a process of negotiation, the president submitting the bill to the National Assembly before it was assented to become law. So why do we still have states who are defaulting?
Well, I think first, if you ask the way I respond to this, I think it's cheering that the federal government is leading the way. It is serving as a pointer to other states if they are, not recognizing that there is a standard. In fact, the goal of federalism, as we had it when we had 3 regions and ultimately 4 regions, is that there's this sort of competition, where no region will feel or want to be left behind. So it's strange that states would now receive this kind of, I don't want to call it reprimand, but a sort of guidance from the urging from the federal government to do the proper thing. I think this year is ending on a very good note to hear that the federal government is now requesting state governments to, to ensure that they comply with the national minimum wage standard of 70,000 naira minimum. I think that it will be very difficult for any state to, do anything less than that as we approach the new year. We've seen states that are very proud, interestingly, those states that, led the way by even going above the 70,000 naira threshold, so it's just an indication that it's doable. And no state can give any excuse. No state, even whether it's Zamfara or the Bayelsa, whichever state. I mean, just the parameters are there. But we're not looking forward to the idea of downsizing just to be able to meet the national minimum wage standard. We must understand that wages have a way of not only affecting the workers immediately, but ultimately the economy when it has a way of helping dependents. So I think it's something that needs to be done. It's a priority. We've even seen, in fact, I hope it is true, where a particular state government in the southeast, I don't want to mention it, but giving a bazaar of 150,000 naira increment as
I think we know the state.
So I think the year is ending on a good note.
But it's interesting you mentioned Edo State. Your state as well, as I recall, Delta State is also going above 70,000 naira.
Yes. Even though I didn't want to mention that, I'm not a public servant, but I do expect Delta State to do more, given the level of, the money it collects from the federation account. I mean, the federation account. But you see, Delta State is also in a lot of debt, given its previous the activities of the previous administration. But we've seen involvement in investments in serious capital infrastructure, bridges and all that by the new governor. I think that perhaps that was what has affected it, because I would have expected more from Governor Wariwe.
But I mean, when you look across board, we've seen states that have gone as high as, I think River State, if I recall, is only about 80,000 or 85,000 thereabout, and then Lagos states like that. But when you look at states across board, the 36 states and the FCT, would there be any legitimate reason why any state will not meet this obligation? Again, it is law, and they were part of this negotiation. So They really do not have an excuse.
No,
but
no, there's
it
no
is almost
doubt.
as constant as the sun, as the rising of the sun, to see states default when it comes to payment of salaries and implementing the minimum wage.
To be honest with you, the federal government simply wants to take credit for doing this. If not, there's a minimum standard. And again, it's nefarious for anybody to think that Nigeria should operate on a minimum wage that is below 70,000 naira. It's already utterly embarrassing to labor that given the high rate of inflation that we have in this country and the skyrocketing prices of basic necessities, one would think that it's reasonable that 70,000 naira should not be something that any state governor should bother about paying. In fact, it's a primary responsibility. The federal government simply wants to be the champion of having been the one that actually convince the states to do that. I didn't need to, but it's good that the federal government is doing this. And Nigeria being what it is, I'm a Nigerian, and I know the kind of politics that is played here. There will be full compliance and total conformity by the state governors now that the federal government is leading the way.
We can only hope for that. But let's talk about the organized labor itself. The movement has historically been seen as a powerful force in shaping labor issues. But do you see any of that in the current labor force that we have? How effective would you say labor has been in even pushing for this implementation? The
truth about it is that labor is not as strong as it used to be. For a long time, its influence has been whittled down, given the military, from the days of military interventions. Adams Oshiomhole, as labor leader, did in fact try to assert that cohesion that labor can, bring to negotiation, forcing government to recognize issues of welfare of not only workers but the larger Nigerian, citizenry. Yeah. But we've seen that labor has become that dog that does bark, but its bites can actually not be felt so much. So we've seen how the government dribbled Joe Ajaro's led NLC with regards to the minimum wage, whereas Joe Ajero had given the impression that perhaps there was no going back on, something in the neighborhood of between 400 and 600,000 naira. Nigerians were expectant, but it seemed as if that with all of the strikes and warnings and all of that, the government simply had its way, only for Joe Ajero to throw his hands in the air and say, look, with all of the increase in the price of PMS, the removal of subsidy, and saying that, look, this is not what we bargained for, such form of helplessness. So I think, too, that the labor should invest more in standards, and I think it has achieved much to the extent that it has been able to double the previous minimum wage. However, unrealistic it may be, but the truth is that labor does no longer command that kind of influence that it is thought to have. Okay, very quickly on labor matters, the federal government is promising 2.5 million jobs annually through a program called the Labor Employment and Empowerment Program. Renewed Hope Labor Employment Empowerment Program, LEAP. Do you think this is feasible? Well, however feasible it may be, it's coming quite late. I would have expected that with the ecstasy, with the excitement that came with the renewed hope agenda of this administration, it would have been the first thing that they would have concentrated on. We talk about 18 months gone already, and that's when you are announcing this. Does it mean that they were not working at a very important manifesto before, working at implementing the manifesto before they took office? So now we're talking about how many months, probably 18 months, years to maybe go. Some more, 18 months then, ago. So how would that happen? But it's good. This is what should happen. A government should be able to raise the hope, to say, look, this is what we can do, and actually it's possible. It can back in massive construction across the entire country, and this can create a lot of jobs. And then it can actually rethink out the telecom industry and see beyond. You need to know the number of jobs, even though they look as if they are informal jobs. But there's a way the government can turn these jobs to some formal sector jobs if they are compliant to the national minimum wage standards. And then we are also looking, it's a possibility. I'm just hoping that this is not a puff, but this is a very hopeful announcement. Okay. Yes, and it's good for Nigeria. It's good for the government. We'll watch the government closely. If it happens that it's able to provide such number of jobs every year, I'm telling you, it will not be a difficult thing for this administration to get re-elected, because there must be some political value. There should be some reward when an administration makes promises and it keeps them. I'm talking about jobs, formal jobs, jobs by the public sector, which currently employs not up to 30% of Nigerians. So it's important.
Okay, very important. And thank you so much, Frank Tietie, for being here tonight. We do appreciate your time. And have a lovely Christmas.
Yes, it's already happening, despite the hardship. And unfortunately, people died in course of
getting palliatives, which is a very sad reminder of where we stand as a people.